I never thought a quiet Saturday afternoon grocery run would turn into the most ridiculous, infuriating, and ultimately satisfying encounter of my life. My name's Daniel Mercer, and for nearly 20 years I've served this town, the very town where respect, law, and order are supposed to mean something. But as I pushed that cart through the aisles of Brookhaven Market, I had no idea that the very people I've sworn to protect, or at least one entitled family among them, would try to challenge me on the most basic level of decency. I'd just finished my week-long shift as chief of police, the kind that leaves you worn, quiet, and craving something simple like fresh bread, a steak for the grill, and a moment to breathe. My badge wasn't on display. I wasn't there as the chief. I was just a man trying to pick up his groceries. But destiny, or maybe just bad luck, had other plans that day. I was at the checkout line when a teenage boy, maybe 16, cocky, clearly spoiled, cut right in front of me, nearly knocking my basket from my hands. His cart was loaded with energy drinks, chips, and what looked like half the junk food aisle. I bit my tongue. I've dealt with worse in my line of work. But then he turned, looked me up and down, and said, "Move. Mom says we're in a hurry." I blinked, thinking maybe I misheard. "Excuse me?" I asked. "You heard me, old man," he spat, waving his phone. "Mom's waiting outside, and she said you'd better not waste our time." I could feel the simmering irritation build in my chest, but I took a breath. "Son, I'm next in line. You can wait your turn." He sneered, snatched a bag of chips from my cart, and threw it into his. "Then hurry up," he muttered. I raised an eyebrow. Not as a cop, but as a man who's seen enough disrespect for one lifetime. "Put it back," I said, my tone low but firm. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of stilettos tapping across tile, fast and sharp like a warning bell. She appeared from around the corner, blonde, mid-40s, expensive sunglasses, and that tight-lipped smile that screams, HOA President. "Excuse me," she snapped before I could speak. "Is there a problem here?" The boy immediately softened. "Mom, this man's being rude." She looked at me like I was something she scraped off her shoe. "You're talking to my son like that? You should be ashamed. He's a minor." "Ma'am," I said evenly, "your son just cut in line and took something from my cart." She gasped, the kind of overacted gasp you hear in soap operas. "How dare you accuse my child of stealing?" "We're members of the Oak Ridge HOA, sir. We don't tolerate people making false accusations, especially not outsiders. Outsiders." The word hit differently, like she meant more than just not a resident. I stayed calm, though inside I could feel that slow burn, the same feeling I get before a storm hits. "Ma'am," I said again, "please just have him put it back and we'll move on." Instead, she stepped forward and, I kid you not, grabbed my cart and started unloading it onto the counter. "We'll be taking these. My son needs snacks for the HOA youth event. You can come back later." The cashier's eyes went wide. The people in line started whispering. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I took a slow step closer and said, "Put my groceries down, now." She smirked, leaned in, and hissed, "What are you going to do about it?" That's when her son whipped out his phone and said, "Mom, record this. He's threatening us." And like clockwork, she raised her phone too. "That's it," she declared dramatically. "I'm calling the police. You just assaulted me by stepping forward." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Go ahead," I said, crossing my arms. "Call them." She did. Right there in the middle of the store. Loudspeaker voice, all drama. "Hello, police? There's an aggressive man threatening me and my son at Brookhaven Market. He's trying to take our groceries." I stood quietly while everyone watched, half curious, half horrified. The irony, of course, was lost on her, because she didn't know who she'd just called. 10 minutes later, 2 squad cars pulled up. Officers I've trained, mentored, and promoted walked in, uniform sharp, eyes scanning the scene. I could see the confusion on their faces when they spotted me standing there, arms crossed, while Karen and her son pointed and shouted. "That's him!" she screeched. "That's the man! Arrest him!" Officer Jensen, my most level-headed sergeant, stepped forward. "Ma'am, can you explain exactly what happened?" "He attacked us," she said, tears suddenly appearing. "He tried to steal our groceries." Jensen turned to me. "Chief, The store fell silent. Karen's expression shifted like a glitch in real time.
Chief?
She stammered. Her son's jaw dropped.
Wait, you're...
I nodded slowly, watching the color drain from her face. Yes, ma'am, I said calmly. I'm Chief Daniel Mercer, and unless you'd like to file a false report against the head of this department, I suggest you put my groceries back where you found them. The silence was absolute. Even the cashier froze. Karen tried to laugh it off, her voice trembling. Oh, this must be a misunderstanding. I didn't mean... But Jensen had already stepped between us, clipboard out. Ma'am, you called in a false emergency. That's a Class B misdemeanor. Her son dropped his phone, muttering something about how unfair it was. We're leaving, she snapped.
Come on, honey.
Not yet, I said, my voice firm. You're going to apologize to every person in this store that you just accused and disrespected. She looked at me like I'd asked her to walk barefoot through glass. But then, seeing the two uniformed officers staring her down, she did it. A stiff, forced apology to the cashier, to the people in line, and finally, to me. I'm sorry, she muttered. You were just intimidating? I nodded. That's one word for it. She grabbed her son's arm and stormed off, muttering something about suing the store. But before she could make it out the door, Jensen called after her, Ma'am! Don't forget, you'll be hearing from our department regarding the false report. She froze, shoulders slumping, and then left without another word. I gathered my groceries, what was left of them, and handed the cashier my card. The crowd slowly dispersed, whispers trailing behind me like echoes. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the parking lot gold. I loaded my car, took one deep breath, and couldn't help but smile. Justice doesn't always come from the badge. Sometimes it comes from standing your ground with integrity. A week later, I got a call from the HOA board. Turns out, Karen wasn't just any member. She was their president. Or rather, she had been. The board had voted to remove her after hearing about the Groceries incident. Apparently, it wasn't her first outburst. That news made my day. Her son, I later heard, was assigned to do community service at the police youth program. Sometimes life writes its own poetic justice. The next time I went grocery shopping, I saw the same cashier. She gave me a knowing smile and said, Quiet day so far, Chief? I chuckled. Let's hope it stays that way. But deep down, I knew stories like this are never truly over, because entitlement has a way of resurfacing, and people like Karen always find a new hill to climb. What matters is how we handle them, with patience, respect, and just enough authority to remind them that no one is above accountability. So if you ever find yourself facing a Karen, remember this: stay calm, stay smart, and stand your ground. And if you enjoyed hearing how justice found its way through chaos, make sure to subscribe to the channel, because there's always another story, another lesson, and another reminder that sometimes karma wears a badge. It had been 6 months since that strange, exhausting day at Brookhaven Market, the day an entitled woman and her spoiled son tried to take what wasn't theirs and ended up learning that not everyone bows to arrogance. I thought that chapter of my life had closed the moment she walked out of that store in shame. But as I've learned over the years, people like Karen rarely walk away quietly. They find new hills to climb, new people to blame, and new lies to tell when truth threatens their pride. The first hint came in the form of a thick, cream-colored envelope that arrived at my office one morning. The return address read Oak Ridge Homeowners Association Legal Committee. I opened it, expecting some dull community update, maybe a safety request or a neighborhood watch invitation. Instead, inside was a formal notice of civil complaint. Karen had filed a lawsuit against me, personally and professionally, claiming I had used my position as chief of police to publicly humiliate, intimidate, and emotionally distress a law-abiding citizen. I sat there, staring at the words, half in disbelief, half in quiet amusement. For a moment, I thought it might be a joke, but the seal at the bottom was real, and the court date was set for exactly 1 month later. I leaned back in my chair and exhaled slowly. I'd dealt with criminals, with hardened liars, even with men who'd done terrible things and still found a way to deny them. But this was different. This was entitlement dressed up in legal paperwork. A desperate attempt by a woman too proud to admit her own mistakes. My deputy, Jensen, knocked on the door and stepped in, reading the expression on my face instantly. "Let me guess," he said dryly. "Karen again?" I slid the papers across the desk. He skimmed them, then let out a low whistle. "Defamation? Abuse of power? That's bold." I smiled faintly. "Desperate people are often bold." Jensen leaned against the wall. "You want me to dig into this?" I shook my head. "No need. We'll handle it the right way, quietly, respectfully, and by the book." The following weeks were strange. Word of the lawsuit spread through town faster than wildfire. Karen had gone on a campaign, posting half-truths and emotional posts in the HOA newsletter, claiming she was a victim of police intimidation. She painted herself as a humble mother who'd been harassed in front of her child. She didn't mention the stolen groceries, the false call, or the humiliation she'd brought upon herself. The board members, embarrassed but cautious, didn't intervene. Some of them still feared her influence, but I didn't. I'd built my career on evidence, patience, and truth, and this would be no different. My lawyer, a calm, older man named Harris, who'd seen more courtroom nonsense than most people see in a lifetime, looked over the documents and smirked. "You don't need to worry, Chief. This case has no legs, but I think we should let her talk. Let her believe she's winning. People like that destroy themselves when given enough rope." The day of the hearing came on a gray, windy morning. The courthouse was nearly empty. Just a handful of curious locals, a few HOA members, and some officers who had volunteered to sit quietly in the back for moral support. Karen arrived in a pristine white dress, sunglasses perched on her head like a crown, her son trailing behind her in a suit 2 sizes too big. She looked confident, too confident. She strutted past me with that same smug smile she'd worn at the grocery store. "Enjoy your last day as chief," she whispered. "This town deserves better than a bully with a badge." I didn't respond. I just looked her in the eye and nodded once. "We'll see." When court convened, Karen's lawyer started with a dramatic monologue, painting me as an abuser of authority, a man who'd terrorized a mother and child over something as trivial as groceries. The words were designed to sting, but they didn't. I'd heard worse, from men with real crimes to hide. Harris let them talk. For nearly an hour, he didn't object once. He just took notes, calm and unbothered. Finally, when it was our turn, he stood and said only 5 words. "Your Honor, we have evidence." And then, quietly and methodically, the truth unfolded. First came the store's CCTV footage, crystal clear, time-stamped, showing Karen's son cutting in line, grabbing food from my cart, and Karen herself calling the police while smirking at the camera. The courtroom murmured. Then came the audio recording from dispatch, Karen's voice, shaking with fake fear, claiming she was being attacked by a man with a weapon. The judge leaned forward, expression hardening. Harris continued, showing the police body cam footage from the responding officers. It showed everything, me standing calmly, arms crossed, while Karen screamed, pointed, and demanded I be arrested. It showed the exact moment her face fell when she heard the word chief. By the time Harris finished, Karen's lawyer was pale. The judge turned to her and asked, "Ms. Whitmore, do you have anything to say in your defense?" Karen opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her confidence had evaporated. Her son wouldn't even look up from the floor. "Your Honor," Harris said, his voice gentle, "Chief Mercer has served this community for over 2 decades with honor. He didn't file a counterclaim, though he would have every right to. He simply wanted this matter resolved with dignity." The judge nodded slowly. "I see no grounds for this lawsuit. In fact, I find it to be frivolous and malicious. Ms. Whitmore, you are hereby fined for court costs and warned that further defamation will result in criminal charges." The gavel hit the desk with a sharp crack that echoed like justice itself. Karen didn't move. She just sat there, trembling slightly, eyes glassy. Her lawyer whispered something, but she didn't respond. When the session adjourned, I stood, buttoned my coat, and walked past her quietly. I paused for a moment and said softly, "You could have just said sorry." She blinked up at me, eyes red. For a moment, she wasn't the loud, entitled woman I'd met. She was just human. Lost, embarrassed, maybe even regretful, but pride is a stubborn thing. She said nothing. I walked out. Weeks later, I heard she had resigned from the HOA entirely. She sold her house soon after. Some said she moved out of town. Others said she stayed with family for a while. I didn't ask. I didn't need to know. Because the truth was simple, I didn't hate her. I didn't even want revenge. What I wanted was peace, the kind that comes when you choose integrity over ego. And that's what I got. A few months later, I was back at Brookhaven Market. Same aisle, same spot where it had all begun. The cashier smiled when she saw me. "Good to see you again, Chief. Quieter days, huh?" I smiled back. "Quieter's good. We've had enough drama for a lifetime." As I loaded my groceries, I noticed a young man outside, Karen's son. He looked older somehow, more grounded. He nodded once when our eyes met, a silent acknowledgement of everything that had happened. I nodded back. That small moment, that quiet understanding, meant more than any courtroom victory ever could. Driving home that evening, the sky was painted gold again, just like that day months ago. I rolled down the window, letting the cool wind wash away the remnants of bitterness. Life, I realized, has a way of balancing itself. Sometimes justice is loud, and sometimes it's silent. But it always arrives right on time. So if you ever find yourself dealing with someone who tries to tear you down out of pride, remember this: you don't need to shout. You don't need to fight dirty. Just stand tall, let truth speak for itself, and the rest will fall into place. Because real power doesn't come from control or status, it comes from calm. And calm always wins in the end. And if this story reminded you that doing what's right will always matter, even when the world seems unfair, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Because here, every story is a reminder that strength isn't about force. It's about character. And sometimes the quietest justice makes the loudest echo.